Cool. Thanks, guys. I'm here to talk to you guys about building custom development tools with Node.js, and also just some other useful tools to help along the way. Some NPM modules that can help you out with building tools that will help you with your development lifecycle, and just a whole bunch of fun stuff related to tools. A little bit about me. I'm Topher Bullock. I'm a software engineer at Pivotal. I'm currently working on Cloud Foundry services. I do a lot of full stack JavaScript stuff in multiple different JavaScript environments, but I definitely love Node. That's why I'm here. There's some GitHub stuff and Twitter stuff on there. Also a picture of Lil Bub, because every talk I do has to have a cat picture in it at least once. Tools. When I think about tools, I really think about specifically tools when I'm developing software. I think about the way that I use tools outside of developing software in my day-to-day life. And I'm a little bit particular about some tools, and I find that certain things, when I want to do a certain task right, I need to have the exact tool. So like shaving, for an example, I really sought out this safety razor that had a long blade on it, and it had a decent weight to the end of it, and I really picked the certain blades that I wanted to use for it, and I was really particular about this specific tool fitting the task that I wanted to perform. And that's the way that I am with software development tools. Anytime that I'm looking at a certain tool, I'm really evaluating, okay, like what are the points of this that I really don't like, and where can this sort of help me along in my development lifecycle? And there's really a lot of things that a tool can do. So it can aid in faster development or make things just easier for you. It can aid in rapid prototyping, so maybe you just want to get something out the door and you don't necessarily really care about how good it looks or anything like that. Task automation, so doing things that you don't necessarily want to keep doing over and over again. You can have something just do that for you and just not worry about it. Write one task that just does everything that you don't want to do for you. And there's also test-driven development, so you can have tools that will help you doing TDD and sort of aid in that task. And also just build systems or build processes. So when you want to actually send an application out to production, you want to have a few build steps in there to like minify your JavaScripts and obfuscate JavaScript and do all that fun stuff. Sass preprocessors and all the other CSS preprocessors. And also just debugging and sort of finding out where you're doing something wrong inside of your code. So really, a good tool can really help in all of these facets. And really, when you use certain tools in a way that fits your exact manner of development. So if you do TDD and you have specific TDD tools that you really love, this can really make the whole development process a whole lot better, and it can just make you a whole lot happier. So a bit of a case study about some woes with Tomcat. So I was working on this fairly large-scale JavaScript MVC application. I was on the front-end team, so I was doing most of the front-end work, and I wasn't really dealing with any of the back-end stuff. I was letting the Java team work on the back-end. So they were leveraging APIs that were being served by Spring, which is totally cool, but Java developers and front-end developers might have a different concept as to what's going on. But eventually, the client wanted us to sort of package everything together in one big happy war file and deploy it to their servers somewhere. And that was how they wanted it. But working on everything together in the same IDE that the Java developers were using, or even using an IDE to begin with, felt really kind of painful. And whenever I saved changes to a certain JavaScript file, I would have to like go back to like wait for Tomcat to like republish all of this stuff. And my IDE was like doing all this stuff in the background. So I really had a problem of observability. So I would open up a file in my IDE, and I'd be changing this JavaScript stuff, and then I would save it, so that would send it back to the file system. And then in the background, my IDE was kind of slowly pushing these changes back to Tomcat while I was opening up the server in my browser and trying to look at my web app changes. But that process was really slow, pushing it out to Tomcat, so I'd have to like wait on something else to build in the background, and it would just be super annoying. For Java developers, it was totally fine because they're used to that. They're just used to things having to compile and you're used to things being slow. And really what came out of this was a realization that although enterprises will resist deploying Node.js in favor of sort of more old school technologies and traditional enterprise level technologies, using a traditional stack in production doesn't necessarily mean you don't get to use Node.js at all for your development. So what I sort of did was I went through and as Node.js reactions posted like, what was that, like 15 days ago? Something like that. I thought this was really sort of applicable to my predicament at the time, which was I was sort of putting a shiny Node veneer on some legacy stack that I didn't necessarily want to be having to deal with. I just wanted to do all my front-end stuff and just be happy doing what I was doing and not have to worry about the fact that there was Java in there somewhere. So what's cool about the JavaScript environment in terms of tools and development workflows is there's been a huge explosion of all of this stuff in the last couple of years where there's a whole bunch of tools that are building up and becoming more and more popular and sort of fitting into these roles that we can really sort of gain a little bit better workflows from and sort of fit these things into our lives where we see fit and sort of as programmers we can decide like, hey, I want to use this one thing and this thing fits my sort of use case for this. So there's a whole lot of things that have sort of come in to fit into these niches. And what's cool about JavaScript is the whole JIFA-SNIF acronym. JavaScript is fun and so Node is fun. So how many people have heard of Grunt? Cool, bunch of you guys. So yeah, Grunt is a sort of task automation / build system tool for mostly front-end development, but you can do a whole bunch of stuff with back-end development as well. And what's cool about it is there's a whole lot of sort of simple configurations and pre-built plugins and tasks that you can bring into your workflows and get something like right out of the box automatically. So you can see like there's a whole big list and all these contrib ones are actually ones that the core Grunt team works on and contributes to fairly regularly to sort of keep up this huge library of tasks that you can just drop into your project and just get running with right away. So there's a whole bunch of ones for like watching a folder and doing some tasks based on that. Minifying JavaScript files, the list just goes on and on. So this is cool because you can sort of find like something really simple that, oh, I wish I had some tool that would do X because X is super annoying and I don't want to do it. And then you can find it just in this list somewhere and it's pretty awesome. So bit of an example of how you might use Grunt. Cool. So when you're using Grunt, you install this CLI tool using npm, and then every project has this gruntfile.js that you drop into your project directory. And there's a good getting started guide on the Grunt page, which sort of runs through all of this. I won't go too much in depth into it. Just their documentation is pretty good. So here's an example of a Grunt file that actually runs my Jasmine tests, because I do a lot of TDD, and I don't necessarily want to always be opening up the UI that Jasmine gives me, and I don't really need to see this fancy interface to show me, hey, here's your test failing, because I don't even really want to see that my tests are failing, but I have to. So what's cool about this is I can just say Jasmine, and it will go through and run all of my specs and tell me that something's failing. Cool. I actually was expecting it to not fail. Oops. Now I have to find out what's failing. Cool. Oops. There you go. So now I can run it and see that my tests are passing. So that's super cool. But what kind of sucks about this is I still have to go to something and I still have to like run this task, and like that's almost too much work for me. I don't want to open up console and like type in Grunt Jasmine every time I want to run my tests. I just want to like make changes to a file and just have this do it sort of automatically for me. that I don't have to go back here and when I do something wrong, run it again, and then see that my tests are failing. So, I mean, looking at this, I'm thinking, it would be nice if I could just get some notification to pop up in my iOS not iOS notifications, my Mac OS X notifications to just sort of tell me, hey, something's failing. I don't even need to worry about this command line tool that I'm running in the background. It will just keep looking at the file system and looking for changes and just run my tests all the time in the background. So I sort of get like continuous integration, something like you would get in like Jenkins or Travis, but this is all locally on my machine. So that would be super cool. So what's cool about Grunt is that you can sort of extend Grunt tasks to do something that they wouldn't necessarily be doing automatically out of the box. You can add some sort of extra stuff onto it, and you can even programmatically run tasks and then listen for events. So Grunt has this nice event interface, which uses this event emitter API. It sort of has a certain spec around how it emits events. And Grunt itself doesn't really do too much with the events, but it's all up to the tasks that you're running to sort of spit out these events and tell you what's going on. So I know that the task for running Jasmine and Grunt gives me these events whenever, where am I? It gives me this jasmine.spec_done event, and that basically tells me that a spec has finished testing, and then that will give me a spec object, and that will have a status of whether it failed or whether it passed. So right now, all I care about is whether it failed. And I actually want variable. So this will tell me this is just a flag that I'm setting, some Boolean that just says, hey, whenever one of the tests fails, I know that something in my entire test suite has failed somewhere. And I'll just get this event on every single spec being done. And as soon as one of them fails, I just set this flag to true. So that tells me, okay, something went wrong in my test suite. So then once Jasmine's entirely done, I want to actually fire off some notification that tells me in a nice way that the tests are failing. Where's my code? My live coding skills are horrible, but my live copying and pasting skills are also failing me today. I don't know how that works. I maybe just record this earlier. So yeah, I get this event from Jasmine that says jasmine.done, and then I know that all of my specs have completed, and then I just want to check whether any of them have failed ever, and then I can use this awesome NPM module called Growl, which basically fires off iOS notifications that will tell me whether my suite has failed or passed. So that's super cool. I'm missing a variable here. Case in point, horrible live coding skills. Cool. So now I can run this and it totally worked. I don't know if this is off. Demo fail. Pardon me? Oh, is that it? That should totally work. Demo fail. So that's super weird. I swear this was working like 2 seconds ago. Yeah, I have no idea why this isn't working. Anyways, if this whole thing worked, I would get a growl event that tells me, hey, my tests are failing, but something is not set up right. I'm not sure what's going on. Just pretend that there's a notification coming up here that it tells me things are failing. Because I honestly don't know what's going on. Maybe it's a sticky one that's failing. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, we'll pretend that worked. There's probably some dependency that I forgot to install, because I do know that the npm module that is talking to the task, like the notification bar, does have some dependency, and I maybe forgot to install that. But I won't bore you guys with installing things. So once I actually, at some point, get that notification working, I don't necessarily want to keep going back to the command line to run my tests over and over again. So I can use watch to actually watch a certain folder to look for changes to any of my JavaScript files. And then whenever I run my command line tool, it will just watch that folder. Am I editing the wrong file? It's possible I'm editing the wrong file. Nope. Okay, I don't know why this demo is entirely failing, but oh, I know why. Great. So it helps when, so a cool thing about this actually is that when I say grunt Jasmine, I can run my grunt Jasmine thing normally, and it will do the grunt task for running Jasmine. But when I want to actually do some cool things inside of a separate JavaScript file, it doesn't necessarily know that that's what I'm trying to do. So I was just running the wrong command in my terminal. So that's cool. It helps when you run the right things. Because, okay, so now that explains everything. I was very confused there. So yeah, it tells me that my tests are failing. And now this guy is actually watching my source directory. So if I make a change in the background, it will run my tests again, and then it'll tell me that my test suite is passing. So that's super cool. So now I don't really even need to worry about what's going on in there. Now that I'm running everything correctly in the command line, and I'm not just running the grunt task that I showed you guys before, I just have this automatic tool that's in the background running all my tests for me, and I don't need to worry about it anymore, and I don't need to even open up the command line. I'll just get all these notifications. And then, like, this is a pretty naive example right now. Like, it's going to run the test suite every time I change a file. So I might want to, like, debounce that and put a bit of a delay to say, like, okay, like, after a few seconds, if I haven't changed another file, maybe I want to run my test suite again. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with this. So yeah, that's super cool. So that's a little bit about what you can do messing around with Grunt. Something I also like to use actually as a development tool is Express itself. I'm not going to ask how many of you have heard of Express. It's probably pretty obvious. It's the E in mean stack, so you guys have probably all heard of it, I assume. So it's great for quickly spinning up a mock API. Say the API team is working on something, but it's not necessarily stable, and they're still pushing changes to it. So I don't necessarily want to deal with the backend team doing all of their changes. I just want to have some sort of API spec on my side where I can just serve up dummy data, and I can just run this stuff locally on my machine, and I don't really need to worry about what's going on the other side. And I can just be happy developing my front-end app. And it's also just good plumbing to serve up a front-end app, because you can just point it to this public folder, and then you also have, if you need it, this whole backend RESTful API that you can just serve up JSON from. So it's super cool for using in front-end development. Skipping over some things. Cool. So a bit of a demo of something I like to do using Express as type. So yeah, using Express as sort of a dummy API that I can mess around with, and maybe I want to actually simulate some latency from the backend. So if my application is maybe not written in something that's fast, like Node, maybe it's Java. I can sort of simulate my API being a little bit slow. So on the front end, I can look at my application and sort of see, okay, like if the API was taking X amount of time to respond, would my UI sort of look weird? Like if I'm depending on all of these AJAX calls to go out and fetch a bunch of models to populate these views, is my UI going to sort of suffer if the API starts slowing down a little bit? Obviously, we never want the API to be slow, but sometimes that happens, and you have to deal with that on the front end. And it's really a lot easier to see when you're actually seeing some slow API responding to you, and then the actual user experience from the front end side. So this is just a really simple Express app, sort of just mocked up from whenever you do Express inside of a folder, just the basics right here. But I have a couple get URLs for user with an ID and for users. And right now I'm just responding with an empty JSON object. Nothing super interesting right now. NodeMon was covered earlier and is super awesome for when you're making changes to files a lot. We'll just reload everything in the background. It's super awesome. So yeah, right now if I hit my API, user API / oh, someone didn't. That's right. Oops. Okay, so now when I go to the actual route that I set up, it gives me some empty JSON object. Not super interesting right now, but there's a whole bunch of libraries out there that sort of let me maybe mock out some JSON data based on some sort of template. So maybe I know that all of my user objects have a username, and I can just set up a whole bunch of example usernames. Maybe they all have specialties in certain programming languages. So this is using a library called mock.json. It's really cool to sort of, it has this templating language inside of it. So I can say an ID is sort of just this variable that's incremented by 1 every time I generate a template from this. And then I can use those username variables that I've defined up here inside of here. So I want just some random username picked from there for all of my name keys. And the same goes for specialties. And I can also say whether they're an anchor on a project. Super cool. What is this code? So now I actually want to change my APIs to be using this template. And I can also set up a template that will create a JSON array. So I just give it data and then just anywhere between 1 and 30 objects, or I could say 15 and 20 objects, just so that I get a nice sort of random list of user objects. Super useful. So this is just good for setting up some mock JSON data to respond with, so that I don't necessarily need to go out and get the data from some API or get some database. I can just sort of mock out user objects. So inside of here, I get a random person from my API. And then if I go to just straight up users, I get a whole list of users inside of here. So that's super cool. But what I really wanted to do was actually set up a useful interface that I could sort of control how fast this API is responding. Because maybe I want to see, okay, what if it takes a really long time to get this list of users? Is my UI going to look like garbage? And I can sort of dial it, like I really want to be able to dial it in to see like, okay, if it takes this long, is it going to start looking bad? Or if it takes X amount of time, is it going to start looking even worse? Or is it going to fail? So it's really useful to use Express for this because Express has the notion of middlewares, where you can basically just stick a middleware in front of every request that's coming in. You can do a whole bunch of stuff inside of there before you actually get to your get mappings down here. So before anyone actually gets to responding with this JSON, I want to do a whole bunch of stuff in between that to sort of block them for a little while. Maybe just do a set timeout, and then eventually I want to render this to the user. So basically, when I want to continue, I just need to call this next function. So what I'm going to do here is just do a set timeout. And I've created a variable on the app object called delay. And I've just set that to 0 for right now. So now I can say just set timeout to call the next function, which will just go on to the next middleware that's in there, which will be, depending on what URL I'm hitting, it'll be either this get for a single user or a get for a list of users. And then I just want to use that delay object. So inside of here, I can change this. And then my API will start responding a little bit slower, and maybe I want to bump it up a bit. Now my API is really slow. I go to like users/1 and actually show you something different. It's going to take quite a long time. I guess a bit of a caveat about using set timeout is that it's not super accurate, so it will not really be accurate to like the exact millisecond necessarily. If you're really particular about how long you want your API to be delayed by, it's going to be sort of as close as possible to that, but it's going to sort of throw it on to the next process tick. So it's a little bit not super accurate. But maybe I want to mess around with a whole bunch of other stuff inside of my mock API. And I really want to do this in a way that's that doesn't even necessarily need to involve me opening up this app.js and messing around with the actual mock API, because that's not something I want to be dealing with. I just want to have some sort of interface that just lets me say, okay, delay the thing for 2 seconds. And I just want to go back to writing my front-end stuff. I don't want to worry about backends because that's not what I'm doing right now. If I'm on the front-end team, I just don't care about the API. Well, I do, but I don't care about working on the API. So something that I can do is use a cool module called REPLify. And that basically lets you expose a REPL, which is read, evaluate, print, and loop. So you can actually just type commands to your API server to set certain variables so that I can mess around with this delay and not necessarily have to worry about going into code to do it. So this is super useful. So I've started up my server, and right now it's just using the delay of 0. So it's not really delaying it at all. But REPLify gives me this cool terminal that I can use. So now I'm actually talking directly to my application. So I can say app.delay, and I can see that it's 0. So maybe I want to set my app's delay to something more than 0. Super cool. So now my API is responding super slowly. So this is super cool because now I don't even need to worry about this app.js. I can just close it. I can open up my front-end stuff and just start working on that. And I don't really need to worry about messing around with anything other than this REPL. So if I just want to set my delay back to 2, I don't even need to worry about going into the API code to mess around with that. And this is really good for sort of exposing the functionality from some command line tool that you're going to be running and distributing maybe to a whole bunch of people. You don't necessarily want them to have to go and like mess around with the actual source code of your app. So you can have like a few set variables exposed so that they can sort of mess around with the tool and sort of use it in ways that help them out. So that's cool. Where are my slides? Close them. This. Cool. So yeah, this is all cool, and it's most of what I've been showing right now is sort of just normal running Node apps. But there's also a few other command line interface libraries that actually let you write these specific tools. And they'll give you a whole bunch of useful things that you can add on to your CLI tools to make them really useful for other people who are going to be picking them up. So maybe you want to distribute this to all of your front-end team to use this API that you're building that lets them add a delay to it. And you want to have a really nice interface for it. So yeah, a few examples is Commander.js. It's written by the same guy who made Express, and it's basically a general purpose CLI tool, CLI library rather, that lets you sort of write, it automatically gives you a whole lot of variables that you can pass to your command line tools. So same way that you can run Express app and give it the port just by doing -p, this will let you, Express. What is it that has a dash? Anyways, it lets you basically write flags that you can pass to your CLI tools. And prompt is just giving people prompts. So if you want to prompt a user to enter some variable, you can just prompt them for that. Chalk gives you some cool colored output, and progress bars using Node Multimeter because progress bars are awesome. So a little bit of a demo of how you can use all of these tools together. So on the documentation page for Commander, if you go to the GitHub, they have this example of creating a program that's a CLI tool that lets you order pizzas. And I thought that was super cool. So I appropriated some of the code from that for this demo. But I thought I could add a whole bunch of stuff onto this that would make it a whole lot better as a CLI tool. So right now, if I run this, if I don't pass it any flags, it will just make a pizza with sort of the default settings. And I don't really get any input on this. But what's cool about this is there's sort of an automatic help functionality inside of Commander where I can just say --help like any other CLI tool will give me. And that will give me sort of the options that I can give to it. So that's super useful when you're creating command line tools, is sort of giving people a help interface so that they're not confused at any point. They can just do --help and just figure out whatever command line they want to send to it. They can just type in those commands and then they're good to go. So I know that I want to have a cheddar cheese pizza with sausage, and I know what my name is, so pass it to that. And now it's actually making me my pizza for me. So that's super cool. But there's a few things that I could add on to this. Maybe I want to actually prompt the user for certain things, because I don't necessarily want them to have to remember all of these flags and do all of this stuff manually. So I can use that prompt library to basically ask them for their name and what kind of cheese they want and what kind of meat they want. So now when I run this again without flags, ignore the fact that it fails. It will actually prompt me for my name. So that's super cool. So then it makes the pizza, and then the pizza finishes. But what kind of sucks about that is making a pizza takes a little bit of time. Takes exactly that much time. So this is where I might want to add in some sweet progress bars, sort of help my users know that things are running. And this is just done on a set timeout just to show you sort of how you can indicate things to the users. But this could be on any other thing that's sort of incrementally happening. So in my previous example of my Jasmine suite, I could know how many suites I have running. So I could show a progress bar to see how far along that is and maybe show that to the users in some interesting way. So what's cool about this is you can sort of customize what color you get. Maybe I want to make it red. The foreground will be black, and I can sort of set what comes in here. Maybe I'll do little O's because they sort of look like pizzas. Just quick enough. So now I can run my program and tell it who I am. Now it actually gives me a cool progress bar, which is super awesome. Cool. So that's just some sort of useful libraries that I've come across along my sort of ventures of creating CLI tools using Node. One thing I'd like to talk about is actually packaging all of this stuff up as an NPM module and actually distributing it. I won't go too far into NPM because I'm running short on time. One thing I do want to point out is a cool command called npm link, which I will switch gears here. So I have this tool that I ended up building for my previous example of my annoying woes with Tomcat, where I just wanted to serve all my files, and I didn't really care about serving it in Tomcat, and I just wanted to proxy everything over to the actual Java server that was running, and I just wanted to edit the files and see them change directly. So I open this up and look at the code. Pretty simple, and it's sort of just a mishmash of all of the techniques that I've shown you guys so far. That's what's cool about doing this stuff in Node, is you can just sort of have this mishmash of NPM modules all mixed together, and you can do some pretty awesome stuff with it. So inside of here, I've imported this live reload module, which basically watches a folder, and then it will output these WebSocket events to this to a plugin inside of Chrome, and then it'll actually automatically reload all of my CSS and JavaScripts from my server into my browser window without me having to go over and refresh that. I figured that was something that I'd want to just toss into a tool. If I'm making a tool, I might as well add some live reload support to it. So it's super useful for when you're doing front-end development. You want to see things updating automatically. I've added my normal API delay stuff so that I can use that same REPL client to delay my APIs. And I have some mock JSON being served from it. Yeah, and that's pretty well all that I have to show for this. But when I actually want to distribute this to someone and have them install it as an NPM module, I need to make sure that inside of my package.json, I have this bin key, and then I tell it what the actual binary that it should link to as like a command line tool when I install it. So I just tell it that it should call it LR proxy because it's my live reload proxy server. And I just point it to this JavaScript file here that's using Commander to basically give a bunch of flags that I can pass to my program. And then I have this command called run that will actually run that Express server as a child process, and it'll basically just be running it in the background on the side. So what's cool about NPM is as long as I have this folder, I can say npm link, then that will actually go and install it as if I installed some module that was actually in the npm repository with the -g flag. So you can do like npm install express -g. Then you'll get express on your command line. That will actually put it into your local bin. So then on your command line, you can say express, and that will actually give you a scaffolded out express project. So you can actually do that for your own projects. So now inside of my terminal, I have this lrproxy run command. So when I'm doing my front-end development, say I'm working on an Angular app, and I want to just serve these files somewhere, and I don't want to worry about putting them on some Tomcat server somewhere. I just want to have something that will run it, and wow, address in use. I'm running it somewhere else. Sweet. So now I have this watch server that's running on port 3000, and that will actually serve my Angular app. So this is using my users API and serving all of my files. And just for free, because I'm using my CLI tool and I know that I've added live reload to it, I can just enable the live reload plugin in my browser and open up my web app project and get the full effect. Really need to both. Cool. So working away, and I have this probably on another screen somewhere, but maybe I want to change this to people. So I don't even need to switch over to my browser to see my changes. I'm just getting this for free because I'm running that live reload watcher inside of the command line tool that I built. So I can give this to all of my front-end friends who are working alongside me, and they will really appreciate that they don't have to switch back and forth between windows to sort of see things changing. So I can change the background image. It reloads. Died. Anyways, so much demo fail. Pardon me? There we go. So now I can change my background to cat pictures. Because, I don't know, cat pictures. I can make the color hot pink too, because hot pink. Just make everything hot pink. All right, yeah. So that's super cool, and that's really kind of the mindset that I have when I'm looking at tools. Is like I see something useful, and I'm like, I want that to be a part of my development lifecycle. So I'll just mash it all together in this awesome tool that's my own tool, and it's something that fits my exact needs. So I have some final slides. Probably fine. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Anyone have any questions? Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, I imagine there's a Firefox extension as well. Yeah.